You didn't find this message. It found you. It arrived the moment your soul began to whisper that the old story no longer fits, that the name you've worn like a second skin has become too tight to breathe in. You've been polishing your reflection for years, sanding the rough edges, repainting the same smile, trying to make your history shine, yet each night the dust returns. Each morning the cracks widen. Something inside you knows this cannot go on. You've been taught that survival means maintenance, that to stay safe, you must keep repairing the same self. But maintenance is a cage built from the bricks of yesterday. You may have called it discipline, healing, or self-improvement, but beneath the noble words was the same ritual worshiping the statue of who you once were. And the more faithfully you served it, the heavier it became. There comes a point when the caretaker must face the truth. Restoration is not resurrection. You cannot build the future out of the ruins of identity. What was sacred for one chapter becomes the anchor in the next. The soul doesn't evolve by addition, it evolves by release. Imagine now that statue, the proud monument of your old self, standing in a vast, silent hall. The air smells of dust and devotion. You are its keeper, exhausted yet afraid to leave. But what if your task is not to polish anymore? What if your task is to let the statue crumble, to allow gravity to finish what grace has already begun? This is the quantum reset, the moment of sacred disintegration, the death that reveals life, the surrender that opens the infinite. It is not destruction, it is recalibration. It is the metamorphosis that only occurs when the caterpillar stops pretending to fly and dares to dissolve. Right here, right now, the invitation stands before you. To let the old self die, not in violence but in understanding. To stop polishing and step outside the museum. To breathe for the first time in open air. Because your future isn't waiting for you to become more, it's waiting for you to become free. The dust from that crumbling statue still hangs in the air. You can taste it metallic, ancient, familiar. Every breath reminds you of the world you built around that single piece of marble, the museum of your mind. Look around. Each corridor echoes with your thoughts, your memories, your rehearsed identities. There are exhibits labeled who I was, what they did, what I regret. And you, the curator, wander endlessly from one display to another, adjusting the lighting, rearranging the plaques, ensuring every artifact of pain is preserved with reverence. But what you may not notice not yet is that these exhibits are alive. Every time you enter a gallery, it flickers with light, as if sensing your presence. The act of remembering reanimates what should have faded. Your mind isn't a static archive. It's a living architecture built of attention itself. Each thought is a visitor pass that renews the exhibit for another day. That's the secret most never learn. Consciousness is a projector, not a camera. You don't capture reality, you cast it. The more you revisit a memory, the more it solidifies, not as history, but as structure. That heartbreak you can't let go of, that failure you keep replaying, that face you still see in dreams, each is a wing of this psychic museum. You built it for safety once, after all. What is trauma if not a failed attempt to make sense of chaos? The mind, desperate for order, constructs rooms of meaning. It frames each pane in glass and labels it proof. Proof that you are unworthy, unlovable, doomed to repeat. The museum feels safe because it's familiar. The walls never move. The temperature never changes. Predictability masquerades as peace. But peace built on repetition is only a prettier name for paralysis. Listen closely to the silence between thoughts that faint hum in the marble halls. That's the sound of your awareness trapped in maintenance mode. The curator dusts and polishes, believing it's devotion. Yet every swipe of the cloth deepens the grooves of identity, carving habit into destiny. You can't change the museum by redecorating it. You change it by realizing it isn't real. The paintings on the wall are made of the same light as the observer. The echoes of memory are nothing more than frequencies of perception looping upon themselves. Imagine standing in the central hall now. Every corridor stretches infinitely, in both directions, past and future, mirroring each other in perfect symmetry. If you turn left, you walk into your childhood. If you turn right, into your fears of tomorrow. Both are reflections of the same projection. Time itself, inside this place, is circular. The curator never leaves because the exits lead only to more exhibits. But there's a hidden door, one that most never notice. It doesn't appear until the mind grows still enough to stop looking. It isn't at the end of a hallway or behind a velvet rope. It's in the gap, the flicker between thoughts, the microsecond of stillness before your next self-description takes shape. That's where reality begins to warp. Step closer. The walls begin to shimmer. The air bends like heat over desert sand. The memories lose their color. The plaques blur into symbols of light. You begin to feel the architecture itself breathing as though the museum were alive, waiting for your permission to change. In that moment, you may realize something profound. You were never the curator at all. You were the electricity running through the entire structure, the consciousness animating every exhibit. The museum wasn't built to trap you. It was built to reveal you. And once you see that, the door appears not as a doorway of stone, but as an absence of it, a perfect oval of pure stillness glowing in the distance. You approach it slowly, the echo of your footsteps blending into silence. You may not know what lies beyond that threshold, but one thing becomes certain to walk through it. You must stop carrying the exhibits with you. Every label, every memory, every definition of who you think you are must be left behind at the gate, because what awaits beyond that door is not another gallery of identity. It's the end of observation itself. As you stand before that glowing doorway, something inside you hesitates. The museum trembles in quiet protest, as if the walls themselves fear extinction. You feel it, the tug of familiarity, the gravitational pull of what has always been known. That's not superstition, that's physics. Every structure of identity obeys laws as precise as those that govern the stars. Consciousness, too, has inertia. The mind resists collapse the way a spinning planet resists stillness. It's not malice, it's momentum. Physicists have a name for this phenomenon when applied to subatomic reality. They call it the quantum Zeno effect. It suggests that a system observed continuously cannot change its state. The act of watching freezes it in place. What they found in laboratories mirrors what mystics discovered in meditation halls centuries ago. Attention is the architect of existence. Now look again at your life through that lens. Every time you analyze your wounds, every time you replay the betrayal or dissect your own behavior, you are not healing the fracture, you are preserving it. The focus itself acts as the glue. By watching, you declare, "This is me," and the universe, faithful to your declaration, complies. This is why transformation feels impossible when effort becomes obsession. You cannot evolve while staring at the equation that defines you. The observer and the observed are dancing in a loop. The more you try to fix the old self, the more energy you invest in sustaining its form. It's not your fault. This is how consciousness learns. It studies itself by repetition. But now your awakening to the flaw in that logic awareness, used unconsciously, becomes surveillance. You've been your own warden, checking the locks of a cell built from thought. Consider this: what if healing isn't the addition of light, but the removal of constant inspection? What if the most radical act of transformation is to stop looking where pain used to live? In quantum language, change only occurs when observation ceases. The moment you stop defining yourself by your previous data, Your wave function collapses not into what was, but into what could be. The field doesn't judge what you focus on, it simply amplifies it. It's the most neutral mirror in the cosmos. That's why hatred of your flaws sustains them. Judgment, even when aimed at the past, feeds the particle with fresh energy. You can't escape a frequency you're still broadcasting. Imagine your identity as a hologram projected by the light of your attention. The moment you stare too intently, the image thickens. But if you soften your gaze, if you let awareness expand rather than contract, the edges blur, the form loosens. The hologram trembles between states, ready to become something new. That trembling is where the real alchemy begins. You might ask, then should I ignore my wounds completely? No, ignorance is still a form of focus. The key is neutrality, observation without attachment, awareness without reinforcement. When you see the pattern without feeding it, the pattern loses coherence. It dissolves naturally, like frost retreating from sunlight. This is why silence heals more deeply than words, why stillness rewires faster than striving. The nervous system, like the atom, responds not to noise but to space. In stillness, the particles of self find new configurations. The frozen wave begins to thaw. So the next time you catch yourself analyzing your sadness, pause. Feel the impulse to dissect it. Then step back. Let the emotion exist without your commentary. Don't label, don't fix, don't categorize, just allow. That simple act breaks the Zeno loop. It reintroduces uncertainty, the fertile ground of evolution. And that's the secret most seekers overlook. Uncertainty is not chaos. It's freedom disguised as nothingness. When you no longer insist on knowing what you are, you become available to everything you can be. Behind the door, the museum's hum fades into a whisper. The air feels different here, less dense, more fluid. The structures of memory begin to shimmer as if turning from stone to water. The particles of your old identity, long frozen under observation, are beginning to move again. It is the first motion of rebirth, imperceptible, but unstoppable. The shimmer grows stronger as you cross the threshold. The walls of the museum dissolve into light, and what once felt solid now ripples like liquid glass. The old architecture is collapsing, not through destruction, but through release. This is the collapse principle, the hidden rhythm beneath every true transformation. You were taught that progress demands effort, that to evolve you must push, strive, and sculpt the future with relentless will. Yet here, in the soft radiance of surrender, the paradox unfolds. The less you grasp, the more reality rearranges itself. The universe does not respond to struggle, it responds to coherence. Consider how a dying star births a nebula. The grandest act of creation emerges from implosion, not expansion. Collapse is not failure, it is transition. It's the quantum moment when form yields to potential. Every identity, every belief, every story you've worn eventually reaches its event horizon. The point where holding on becomes impossible because the energy sustaining it runs out of resonance. You may feel this happening inside you now, the tiredness that no sleep heals, the loss of interest in things that once defined you. That's not apathy. It's cellular intelligence announcing the end of a frequency. The system is withdrawing energy from an outdated pattern. You are being prepared to melt. In physics, when coherence breaks, particles reconfigure into a higher order of organization. In consciousness, the same principle applies when the structure of the old self collapses. Awareness redistributes itself into new forms of expression. You become not the sculpted stone, but the sculptor's breath moving through the chisel of intention. Yet to reach that point, you must allow the collapse. You must let the scaffolding of certainty fall away. The ego will scream. It will call this death, failure, loss, but the soul calls it recalibration. Think of ice transforming into water. From a human view, Something has lost shape, edges, definition. But from the view of the molecule, something magnificent occurs: freedom of movement. The same hydrogen and oxygen remain, only their relationship changes. The structure that was once rigid becomes fluid. That is what happens to your identity in collapse. You do not vanish. You become available. Notice what happens when you stop resisting the fall. The body exhales. The mind quiets. The field, once frozen by constant observation, begins to flow. And as it flows, it reveals something subtle yet profound. Collapse is not the end of the form, but its return to formlessness, the womb of infinite recombination. You've felt this before in smaller ways. The heartbreak that shattered you, the failure that stripped you, the night you thought you'd never survive, and yet, from that void, something unexpected was born. That wasn't coincidence. That was the law of collapse working through you. The energy once locked in old configurations became available for creation. The reason this process terrifies the mind is simple: collapse removes the observer. It dissolves the one who thought they were in control. But liberation was never about control, it was about trust. The moment you stop dictating how the universe should behave, you make room for it to reveal intelligence far beyond your plans. So breathe, let the structure fall, let the meaning you clung to turn to mist. You are not losing yourself, you are losing your confinement. And as the dust of identity drifts away, you begin to sense the new geometry forming underneath something fluid, golden, alive. The energy that once fueled the statue now dances freely in your field. You are no longer the marble. You are the motion. Ahead, the air begins to pulse with a strange luminosity, like dawn gathering inside a dream. From within that glow, a realization approaches, quiet, yet undeniable. You were never the curator of the statue. You were the sculptor all along. The realization arrives not as thunder, but as an inner echo, soft, seismic, irreversible. You stand amid the dissolving fragments of your past, and for the first time, you feel the weight of the hammer in your hand. The museum fades behind you, and suddenly the story of your entire life rearranges itself. You are no longer the servant of the statue, you are its maker. It's dizzying at first, because if you built it, then every fracture, every scar, every limitation you blamed on fate was once your creative choice. That understanding stings, yet beneath the sting, a strange warmth blooms, the warmth of reclaimed authorship. The sculptor's awakening is the moment responsibility ceases to feel like burden and begins to feel like power. You realize that no one carved your pain into you. You carved it yourself, stroke by deliberate stroke, shaping a self that could survive the environment it was born into. Every defensive layer was an act of genius engineering. Every flaw was the mark of adaptation. You begin to see your entire story differently, not as tragedy, but as craftsmanship. The stone you used was rough because roughness was the only material available at the time. You carved fast because life demanded it. You shaped strength out of fear, endurance out of scarcity, and identity out of contradiction. That was never failure, it was art under pressure. But all great artists reach the same threshold the day their masterpiece no longer mirrors who they've become. What was once a triumph becomes a tether. That's where you stand now, sculptor, between reverence for what you made and reverence for what you're becoming. You may notice the trembling in your hands. That's not fear, that's recognition. The tools were never taken from you. They were only buried beneath the dust of duty. The hammer of awareness, the chisel of choice, the breath that animates both. They're still here, waiting. To use them again means something radical. You must risk destroying what you once adored. You must love yourself enough to dismantle the very creation that once saved you. This is the paradox. Every awakened artist must face the act of self-demolition as devotion. When you lift the hammer this time, it's not in anger, it's in gratitude. You whisper to the old form, "Thank you. You carried me when I could not walk. You taught me to survive, but survival is not living. I release you." With that first swing, you don't hear shattering. You hear resonance, a tone like a bell struck in eternity. Each fragment that falls returns to light. The dust glows golden. The echo ripples through timelines, through memories, through versions of you still frozen in their own museums. Because the sculptor's awakening doesn't just free the present, it liberates the entire lineage of your becoming. Every version of you that believed in limitation feels the tremor of release. The past rearranges itself under the vibration of realization. This is what true forgiveness feels like, not an apology, but a recognition that no one was ever to blame, not even you. Every act of pain was an unfinished brushstroke, every failure an unrefined note in the composition of expansion. You were never broken. You were becoming articulate in the language of creation. Now, with dust in your hair and light in your hands, you step back from the shattered statue. The air shimmers with the birth of something unnameable. You've proven that creation and destruction are twins, that endings are beginnings wearing different costumes. The hammer rests by your side. The silence deepens, charged with potential. And in that silence, the next truth begins to stir, one that whispers not of tools or stone, but of the infinite blankness waiting beyond form, the void, the fertile nothing from which every masterpiece is born. The silence after the last strike feels alive, not empty, not cold, alive. As the final fragments of the statue dissolve into light, the echo of creation fades, leaving only stillness. Yet this stillness is not absence. It hums softly, like the air right before a storm, like a field waiting for rain. You are standing in the fertile void. This is the space every mystic, every physicist, every artist has touched in their own language, the 0 point, the womb of the quantum field, the dark soil of potential. It is the place between breaths, where nothing has yet taken form, and therefore everything is possible. At first, the mind panics. It demands structure. It searches for the next identity to occupy, the next problem to solve. It wants the museum back its familiar halls of meaning. But the soul knows better. It recognizes this silence as home. The fertile void is pure awareness, without architecture. It's the pause between the heartbeats of creation. It's the raw material of all worlds, vibrating silently, awaiting the sculptor's next command. You may feel it now, the vastness of this field pressing gently against your awareness. It doesn't ask you to think. It asks you to listen, to trust that the universe is still composing even when you can't hear the melody. Consider the night sky galaxies born from dark matter, stars igniting from the hush of emptiness. The cosmos doesn't rush to fill its voids. It allows them to gestate brilliance. The same law applies to consciousness. You are not meant to flee the emptiness. You are meant to dwell within it until it speaks. This is where faith ceases to be belief and becomes biology. The nervous system learns to rest in uncertainty. The body, long addicted to urgency, begins to remember the rhythm of expansion: inhale, dissolve, wait. The mind calls it surrender. The soul calls it alignment. Here, even time begins to soften. The past no longer clings. The future no longer demands. You stand in the eternal present, where possibility pools like light before dawn. There is no pressure to act, only permission to be. Yet beware, the void tests you with subtlety. It whispers, "Do nothing." But the ego translates that into paralysis. True stillness is not stagnation. It's a dynamic poise, like the hawk hovering before the dive, the pause that gathers all direction in one breath. In this sacred pause, reality reorganizes itself. The subatomic particles of your being receive new instructions from your silence. Every time you resist the urge to fill the space, you amplify its creative charge. Every moment you choose presence over reaction, the field listens and begins to arrange itself around your calm. This is the reversal of human conditioning to create not by effort, but by resonance, to allow rather than to enforce. It's the artistry of nature itself, the seed that does not force its bloom, the ocean that doesn't chase its waves. And then something exquisite happens. The void, once intimidating, begins to feel intimate. The silence grows warm. You can sense shapes forming just beyond perception, glimmers of color, ideas, new realities vibrating on the edge of emergence. The creative current is stirring, and it's waiting for your intention to give it direction. The sculptor's hands twitch again, not from duty, but from wonder. You realize you don't need the old blueprint. The void already holds one living, fluid, co-authored by your consciousness and the intelligence of the universe. In this space, creation is no longer a task. It's a communion. Every thought, every emotion, every breath becomes a brushstroke across the unseen canvas. The fertile void is not where you end. It's where you begin again, not as the statue, not even as the sculptor, but as the living collaboration between stillness and possibility. From within that living stillness, a subtle glow begins to rise. It gathers in the palms of your hands, warm, golden, intelligent. The void is answering you. It invites you to complete what began so long ago, not a battle, but a benediction. This is the ceremony of release. You return, in vision, to the silent hall of your soul. But the air is different now, softer, luminous. The statue stands once more before you, not in defiance, but in offering. Its surface shimmers with the residue of memory, a monument of all the selves you've ever been. This time, there is no judgment, only compassion. You approach slowly, each step echoing like a heartbeat through eternity. Your body knows this is sacred work. With every breath, you recall that the purpose of ceremony is not to destroy, but to transform through recognition. Place your hand, the energetic one, the hand of awareness, upon the heart of the statue. Feel its coolness. Beneath that stone texture, you can sense movement, a pulse, the faint rhythm of every story it once contained. Whisper your gratitude to it. Thank it for being strong when you could not be. Thank it for guarding your innocence when the world felt hostile. Thank it for holding the weight of all your unfinished sentences. In that act of thanks, something shifts. The tension between you and it softens. You are not two anymore. You are one organism completing a cycle of expression. The statue does not resist. It knows. It has been waiting for this release longer than you have. As you continue to pour gratitude, the stone begins to warm beneath your hand. Cracks start to glow like veins of molten gold. The fractures you once despised become luminous pathways, conduits of returning energy. Light floods outward, gentle but unstoppable. There is no explosion, no sound of breaking, only the sigh of matter exhaling back into light. The statue dissolves from within, particle by particle, each piece lifting as a glimmering spark. It doesn't vanish into nothing, it rejoins everything. You step back and watch, breath caught between awe and peace. The hall fills with light, not the blinding kind, but the kind that feels like forgiveness. It caresses your skin, your lungs, your eyes. You realize you're not witnessing the death of the past, but its redemption. Every sorrow, every failure, every doubt is being transmuted into photons of wisdom. The ground beneath you becomes a constellation, countless points of radiance, settling where the statue once stood. You look down and see them pulsing, alive, forming patterns that shift with your breathing. It's as if your entire past has become a star field, waiting to be walked upon. You take a step. The light responds. Each movement sends ripples through the floor like walking across the surface of a galaxy. You are literally treading upon your own liberation. A whisper rises from within the luminous air. Nothing was wasted, nothing was wrong. You feel it as truth, not concept. The statue was never an enemy. It was a cocoon, an instrument through which your soul learned form. Now that form has fulfilled its purpose, the butterfly does not mourn the chrysalis, it blesses it. This realization expands until tears blur the light. Not tears of grief, tears of homecoming. The tension between past and present dissolves, leaving only unity. You can feel the pulse of the universe in your chest, steady, infinite. As the last flecks of light ascend, silence settles again, but it's a new silence, full and resonant, humming with possibility. You are weightless, transparent, radiant. The ceremony is complete. You bow your head not to an idol, but to the intelligence that orchestrated this moment. You have not conquered your past. You have consecrated it, and in that consecration, the next phase awakens the gentle reappearance of old ghosts, the residual patterns that linger like echoes after the song. But this time you will meet them differently. The light fades into quiet, but in that new stillness, faint vibrations ripple through your field. You feel them as shivers, old patterns stirring, fragments of thought reassembling like mist. They are subtle, familiar. The ghosts of the old self have returned. Do not be alarmed. Their arrival is not regression, it is residue. The energy of the statue may be dissolved, but the atmosphere still holds its echo. What you once believed about yourself lingers in the nervous system, like phantom sensations after the body heals. The muscle memory of pain hums one last time, seeking acknowledgement. These ghosts appear in ordinary ways, a sudden tightening in the chest, a self-critical thought, the reflex to hide when someone sees you too clearly. They whisper with the same voices that once ruled your life. You'll fall back. You haven't changed. It's safer to pretend, but now you know better. You are no longer the curator chasing shadows with tools of control. You are the artist of awareness, the one who understands that observation, not reaction, is the solvent. See the ghosts for what they are, after images of a consciousness that has already expired. They possess only the life you lend them. Each time you wrestle with them, you breathe oxygen into their fading forms, but each time you notice them without judgment, you reclaim that energy as your own. Try it now. Feel one of them, maybe the whisper of unworthiness, maybe the old fear of failing again. Don't suppress it. Let it stand in front of you like a translucent silhouette. Notice its texture, its emotional temperature. Don't argue, don't explain, simply look. As you watch, you might sense the ghost flicker, as if confused by your silence. That confusion is liberation beginning. The ghost feeds on identification, not attention. Observation without attachment starves it of substance. Its outlines blur, its voice cracks. The echo begins to fade into the ambient hum of the universe. This is the art of dissolution, gentler than exorcism, more precise than affirmation. You are training your consciousness to hold neutrality. In this neutrality, the nervous system rewires itself. Old neural loops lose their charge. The past ceases to be a gravitational force and becomes a reference point. No longer a command, some ghosts may resist, replaying their favorite lines. You always do this, you'll never change. Smile softly. Their persistence only proves how often you once fed them, but stay patient. The less attention you grant, the faster they thin out. Eventually, they pass through you like wind through an open window. This practice may feel unfamiliar, even disorienting, because it defies the old paradigm of effort. There is no battle here, no victory chant, no finish line, just awareness, vast, transparent, luminous. In that awareness, the ghosts dissolve not through will, but through understanding. When a wave meets the ocean, it disappears, only to discover it was water all along. Your ghosts are waves of memory returning to the same realization. There will come a moment, perhaps tonight, perhaps in the quiet between breaths, when a familiar trigger arises, and for the first time, you don't react. You simply notice. A still joy blooms in your chest, subtle but unmistakable. That is freedom announcing itself, not with fanfare, but with absence. Absence of tension, absence of fear, absence of the compulsion to fix what no longer exists. The ghosts do not vanish all at once. They fade in layers, each farewell a soft unraveling of your former vibration. But with each passing, the space inside you grows wider, lighter, more radiant. The fertile void reappears not as emptiness now, but as invitation. And from within that luminous silence, a new question begins to stir, rising like dawn over the horizon of your awareness. If the ghosts no longer define you, then what force within you will shape what comes next? That question lingers in the air like the afterglow of lightning. What force within you will shape what comes next? The ghosts have thinned, the hall has emptied, and now the vastness within you stands ready, not as void, but as canvas. The fertile silence is no longer intimidating, it is intimate, shimmering with unexpressed realities waiting to be chosen. This is where the sculptor becomes the artist of the quantum field. Creation here does not require stone or hammer or blueprint. It requires coherence, the alignment of feeling, awareness, and intention. You are not constructing form from effort. You are inviting form through resonance. The universe is not a factory responding to commands. It is a mirror responding to vibration. Every thought, every emotion is a frequency you broadcast into the field. And the field, like perfect acoustic space, plays it back. The question is no longer, what do I want? But what energy am I becoming? Consider light. It bends around gravity, obeys the curves of space-time. Your consciousness operates the same way it bends reality around the gravity of your most dominant state. The more coherent your energy, the clearer your reflection. This is the art of quantum creation, sculpting not matter, but meaning. You begin not by planning, but by feeling. Before action, there is vibration. Before vibration, there is awareness. So you pause in the silence, hand on your heart, and ask the fertile void question, what energy wants to move through me now? The answer never arrives as a sentence. It arrives as sensation, a warmth, a rhythm, a pull toward something unseen yet unmistakable. Maybe it feels like calm, maybe like joy, maybe like quiet certainty. Whatever arises, honor it. That's the field speaking through you. Your task then is simple but sacred. Align your actions to that feeling. If calm arises, move slowly, speak gently, breathe fully. If curiosity stirs, follow it with humility. The energy will shape the moment effortlessly when you let it lead. You are no longer chasing outcomes. You are translating frequencies into form. You've reversed the old equation of control from doing to become into being, to create. This is how galaxies emerge: vibration first, structure later. Try noticing how reality responds. People shift around your calm. Opportunities drift toward your openness. Coincidences appear not as accidents, but as harmonics. This is not magic, it's resonance. The external world is echoing your internal song. And yet, caution is needed here. The ego loves to hijack creation, to turn it back into performance. If I feel grateful enough, I'll get what I want. But the quantum artist knows desire anchored in lack carries static. Creation flows only through sincerity. The feeling must be its own reward. You create not to fix, but to express, not to escape, but to embody, not to fill emptiness, but to celebrate fullness. In this new mode, manifestation is no longer a goal, it's a byproduct of alignment. You become like the seed that simply responds to sunlight, effortless unfolding, silent orchestration. And because creation now arises from stillness, it carries beauty free from desperation. The future stops being a destination and becomes an atmosphere. You move through your days like a painter who knows the canvas is alive, each brushstroke an invitation rather than a command. This is the turning point of mastery, when you realize the field doesn't need instruction. It needs intimacy. It doesn't ask for discipline, it asks for presence. The quantum artist doesn't sculpt reality alone. They co-create with an intelligence woven through every particle of being. When you wake tomorrow, before touching your devices, pause, inhale deeply, ask the question again, what energy wants to move through me now? Then listen not with your mind, but with your entire nervous system. Let the answer move your hands, your words, your choices. This is how a new world forms, not through effort, but through coherence. And as you live this way, something miraculous occurs. The line between creator and creation begins to blur. You no longer look at life from the outside. You are life, sculpting itself through awareness. The artist and the artwork merge, and from their union, mastery is born. The merging happens quietly, almost imperceptibly. One morning, you wake and realize you no longer think about alignment. You are alignment. You no longer seek signs from the universe, because your breath itself has become a sign. The sculptor, the field, the creation, they have converged into a single pulse of awareness. This is the threshold of mastery. It isn't the mastery of control, it's the mastery of communion. You've stopped commanding the current and started dancing with it. The river no longer feels separate from the swimmer. Every motion is both choice and response. Here, life begins to paint through you. You speak words you didn't plan, yet they arrive with precision. You take steps without maps, yet the ground appears beneath your feet. The logic of cause and effect dissolves into something subtler, a choreography of trust. The quantum artist understands that reality is responsive, not reactive. It's not waiting for orders, but listening for coherence. When you emit contradiction, it returns static. When you radiate clarity, it sings back in harmony. The field mirrors the state of your internal orchestra, so you begin to treat your inner world as an instrument. Your thoughts are strings, your emotions, percussion, your intuition, wind. Each day, you tune yourself not through judgment, but through attention. When anger rises, you don't suppress it. You listen for the discord and breathe until it resolves. When fear whispers, you don't fight it. You invite it into rhythm until it transforms into movement. This is emotional alchemy, artistry in motion. Mastery isn't the absence of storms, it's the ability to sail them without capsizing. The ocean doesn't fear its waves, and neither should you. You now know that every surge is your own energy returning for refinement. Every challenge, every delay, every detour is clay in the sculptor's hands, teaching you new forms of grace. In this state, manifestation ceases to be a technique and becomes a temperament. You don't visualize outcomes, you inhabit vibrations. You don't chase purpose, you emanate it. Your very existence becomes instruction to the field, and reality reorganizes itself accordingly. You start noticing synchronicities everywhere, conversations aligning like constellations, timing that feels orchestrated, outcomes arriving with a precision impossible to plan. You smile, not in surprise, but in recognition. The field is no longer mysterious. It is intimate. It has your signature. And yet, mastery carries humility. You understand that even this harmony is transient, that the artist must continually release their own brilliance to stay fluid. The moment you cling to success, it fossilizes into another statue. Creation demands surrender again and again. That's the paradox of enlightenment. The closer you get to knowing everything, the more you dissolve into not needing to know. The more infinite you become, the gentler your touch upon the world. You stop trying to illuminate others and simply embody light. Now, when you look at others polishing their statues, you don't pity them. You see sculptors in training, learning through friction, through form. You know that every soul must walk through its own museum, hammer its own marble, and one day discover the same truth, that they were never prisoners of stone, only apprentices of creation. This is what it means to be the master artist of reality. To walk as the field itself, aware, compassionate, precise, endlessly curious. To live as a breathing bridge between the unmanifest and the manifested. And when the time comes, as it always will, to let even this identity dissolve, you will smile, knowing that creation never ends, it only changes instruments. For the artist who knows they are the art can never truly disappear. They simply become the next masterpiece waiting to be born. The echoes of your masterpiece still shimmer in the air. What remains now is silence, soft, benevolent, immeasurable. You stand within it, neither artist nor statue, neither seeker nor found, just awareness breathing itself. The ground beneath you glows faintly, the remnants of every past version of you glittering like dust in morning light. You feel gratitude, not the emotional surge of relief, but the calm gratitude of completion. The sculptor's hands rest. The universe hums quietly in agreement. Here, there is no need to name what you've become. Identity feels irrelevant in the presence of this immensity. You simply are. The field flows through you, and you through it no beginning, no end. You've crossed from creation into communion. Notice the still rhythm of your breathing. Each inhale gathers the infinite. Each exhale releases it back, unpossessed. This is what freedom feels like when stripped of effort, not a conquest, but a remembering. The cosmos creates through your stillness now. Every heartbeat is an invitation for the next world to unfold. You might wonder what comes next, but the answer no longer matters. The mastery you've reached is not a finish line, it's a way of listening. When the next form arises, you'll recognize it by resonance, not by reason. You'll follow what feels like quiet inevitability, the gentle pull of harmony seeking its next expression. And if ever the ghosts return, if ever the world tries to rebuild the museum around you, you'll smile, remembering this silence. You'll know that nothing needs to be fixed, only witnessed. You'll know how to step back into the fertile void, into that living stillness that births galaxies and dreams alike. The story of the old self is complete. The next masterpiece is waiting in your breath. Let it come in its own time. For now, be still. Feel the pulse of eternity behind your ribs. That is the sound of the universe remembering your name.